Well, good evening and welcome to About the Valley. And tonight we're going to talk history. And you can see our guests are here, Christine Johnson, Ken Warchol, and Carol Brouwer, all from the Northbridge Historical Society.
Well, an historical commission.
Historical
A commission.
Yeah.
It's all about history, whatever the
Yeah.
title
Yeah.
is.
We're talking about this place in particular, which is located right on Linwood Avenue. And if you don't recognize it, it's currently the school administration building.
Right.
And supposedly they're going to be moving out of there one of these days. I don't know when.
I think there's no current plan, and
Well, there was, but then
Yeah.
something must have happened.
there's been some funds appropriated for them to do a study as to whether they can move here or there, but I don't think it's underway yet with all they have to do. And
I mean, you know, it used to be, originally it was in the middle school. We go back when it was a high school. That was the superintendent's office was in there. So there's space in there to do it.
like,
So but, you know, that's up to the school department. But right now, what we're talking about, it was at one time Arthur Fletcher Whitin's mansion.
exactly.
It was built in 1875. Many of the mansions were in the kind of the outskirts of what is now the National Register District. But Arthur Fletcher Whitin's in 1875 decided to choose this spot and built this particular mansion, this Victorian mansion, and it served him for his entire life, and later sold to the parish, St. Patrick's,
Yes.
and it was used for the nuns, and
Right.
the school was right next door there
Right.
in St. Patrick's School for grades 1 through 6.
And then after St. Patrick was done, town bought it. And the primary school, of course, located within the St. Pat School. But then the administration, the school department took over for administration.
But-
If you've ever been in there, it's beautiful inside.
Right, it's, what happens is this building, as all the White mansions, were elegant. They brought in the best artisans to work on fireplace mantles. All the woodwork was done, the windows, all done by glass workers that were specialized. So any one of the White mansions you go into, the interior was just gorgeous.
Oh, I know. Now, he was one of the cotton mill owners, right?
He was, well, Charles Whiten, the son, the third son, Charles Whiten, son of the original Paul Whiten. Charles had one of the twin mansions, which are no longer there, at the corner of Douglas Road and Castle Hill. He had an estate with many acres, a nice pond there. And Arthur was the last of his children.
Oh.
And Arthur is especially known because he kind of made fame, not through White Machine Works and the mills, but he started the spinning ring company right there
okay.
on Douglas Road. And
Yes.
they discovered a better ring that would spin faster, making the thread in all the textile mills. So that was a new find, and all of a sudden all the mills were buying that. And what sprung up this, which was some 164 workers at its height in the Whiten Spinning Ring Company, which was actually separate and not tied in with John C. Whiten's mansion.
Right.
We found a lot of information. We have a PowerPoint to share and take you on a little tour of the property this evening, including the inside.
Yes, we can do that right now.
The school administration was gracious enough to allow us to take a tour, and they walked us through the entire building. We didn't go through the basement, but they actually took us to the third floor, and I was surprised that Colonel Paul Whiten here had never been up to the third floor, so that was a new experience for him and for all of us. But through the research that we have put together, we found an article. He had many contributions, and we'll go over some of them through the PowerPoint, but he was called by the papers of the time one of the most benevolent citizens of Northbridge, for all that he supported and all that he gave to the town, many of which are still standing, so his footprint is very visible throughout the community.
Oh, well, the Whiten family in general.
In general, right.
Extremely benevolent to the town.
The paternalism is paternalism
Yeah.
at its best. They kind of even politically ran the community, so to speak,
Right.
and they took care of their workers with all kind of social programs, encouraged religion regardless of what church, but encouraged religion, and also the schools. They're very with the grammar school. The first was built by the Whitens. The high school on Linwood Ave there, again, donations from the Whitens, and so that benevolence was really respected by the people, and the sports teams that they supported, just all the
Well,
social,
right down to, I think they built LaSalle Field.
Yes.
the fields,
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know if we want to show a couple slides on the PowerPoint, and maybe we can speak to them as they come up. We thought we'd take you on a little tour of, first, who is Arthur and what does he look like anyway? You know, we refer to all these Whiten family members, and I don't think oftentimes we're able to put a face to a name, so.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way, when I started at the library in 1978, Arthur's picture is in there along with his brother Edward, because they built the
They
library.
built the library,
They
right.
built the library.
No, they built the church next door too.
Yep, yep.
So you might be able to see the circled name on that,
A geology
on the
chart.
the geology chart,
Geology
which
chart,
hangs
yeah.
in our town hall. But notice how close that circle is to the top line.
Yeah.
He's actually the grandson of Colonel Paul Whiten.
Yeah.
And,
You can't get more direct descendant.
right, and that's his wife. Carol, I think you have a lot of information about
Yeah.
her history.
Catherine was the daughter of the minister at the Congregational Church.
Oh,
And she's having a senior moment. Anyway, her father was at the church. She was there for 28 years. He was the first minister to live in the white parsonage, you know, to the right
which
of the
they
library.
also built.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's important is, on that slide, is that the couple had no children. And she passed before Arthur. So
Right, 10 years
Arthur's
ago.
estate was left in trust.
Oh,
And some of the funds from his estate are still being used today. I know at the high school, each year, we give out the Arthur Fletcher Whitin Memorial Scholarship to a
Yeah.
deserving student.
Oh,
So
okay.
even today, besides seeing his footprint all through our community, the money that he left to build some of the things that are still standing is still providing funds for organizations and different
Yeah.
events, if you will, like awarding of a scholarship today, which
Right.
is
And-
pretty
and-
amazing.
And one interesting one, he left the fund to heat the town hall for years
Yes.
and years.
Yeah.
And then it ran out, and all of a sudden the town was paying, and the questions, why is this money we're paying to heat the town hall? I thought there was a fund. Well, that fund ran out, and so then the town had to
but the
take it
steam,
over.
the heat town came from the White Machine Works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And when that got shut off,
Yeah.
the town had to put a furnace in.
Right.
Yeah, because the heat went up to even the J.C. Whiten
Yes,
mansion too.
yes, and the
Yeah.
gym,
Yeah,
And just about everything.
yeah.
yeah.
So the next slide gives you a little snapshot of his father and mother's house, which, like so many of the other Whiten Fletcher mansions,
That are gone.
are gone. And so this house is no longer standing.
Kenny always refers to these as the twin mansions.
They're almost exactly replicas of each other. There are two twin mansions on Douglas Road of the two sons, Charles and James.
Yeah.
And what happened is, Charles and Paul, and what happened is they built them almost identical and they're referred to as the twin mansions. You almost couldn't identify them in pictures which one was which because they're so similar.
And if you live in town and you're not from the community, or even if you are, you can cite where these were by looking at the corner of lot that is Douglas Road and Castle Hill Road.
Yeah.
Some of us might remember Banning's flower shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the red barn is still standing on
Yeah.
Whiten Avenue in the back. So it was generally in that area where
Yeah.
those two houses
So
stood.
the White Machine Works turned that into a parking lot.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when the need came for parking, well, we'll get rid of the mansion.
Right. What was that song?
That
Sheryl
was-
Crow's put up a parking lot.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So I mean, we had the James Fletcher house, and then we had Paul number two's house, and then this one. This one actually was a little bit bigger, and included Bannings, and there's a big garden in the back too. It's called the Ravine, and there's a small pond in there, and there's all kinds of.
During the Depression is
Yeah.
when they tore them down because they were trying to sell them, move them, and they weren't moving, and so eventually they, 1930, I think,
1930.
and
Yeah.
they demolished them and
Yeah.
took them down.
Because actually, after Catherine died, Arthur moved into that house.
Right.
And spent a ton of money, restoring it. But then, after he died, nobody was
Yeah,
interested,
exactly.
and they
Yeah.
took it down.
Carol, is the little pond
It's still
near
there.
the ravine called, is that Riley Pond?
No.
No,
Oh,
it's a
no,
different
no,
pond.
no.
It's
It was
still there.
just in back of the house, and it's on the east side of the road.
Right.
And when you drive up there, if you're looking around and you know it's there, it's full of evergreens. I mean, evergreen, rhododendrons and mountain laurel, that type of thing.
I think there's a walk at Castle Hill this Saturday
There
on the new
is.
trail, so it's a
Yeah.
great time to pop over
Here you
and check
go.
out the
Yeah.
parking lot
Yeah.
and see where
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
stood. The next slide is actually just some bullets about, and we've touched on some of them, what all Arthur Fletcher Whitin did for the community.
Yeah.
And I think we went through a lot of them. The high school, LaSalle Field, the dormitory for teachers. Kenny, you've mentioned that several
It's got
times.
that
Right.
mansard roof on it.
Right, we had right down next to the name of the garage, Crothers
Down,
Garage.
yeah.
It's right there. He made that into a teacher dormitory because at the turn of the century, in 1900, it was difficult to get teachers. Many lived in distant areas, and transportation, the trolleys were there, but it took a long time to get teachers to work. So he offered that as a dormitory for teachers, and they had to provide their own food, but the kitchen was available. They had a room where they could stay, and the weekends they'd go home.
And if you
when it
look
was-
at the town reports too, the women got a fraction of what the male teachers got.
Right.
But
Because they-
also, the women could not be married.
Correct.
Teachers, yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
couldn't teach if you were married.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
That was right up until after World War II.
Yeah.
Was it that
Yeah.
late? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
Jack-
had to live in the
Jack Walker's
community
mother.
too, right?
Yeah, you had
Yeah,
to live in the community and you had to be single
Yeah.
to be a teacher. Unbelievable.
They, that slide also mentioned their civic and philanthropic causes. I know when we were doing some research, there was so much on,
Yeah, well, particularly in his will. Again, because Catherine was very religious, and so was Arthur. He was the treasurer of the church. He was in charge of the Sunday school. So in his will, there was all kinds of money that went to different missionary organizations, both in this country, like for blacks and for indigenous peoples, and also overseas.
and there's letters at the library from numerous people thanking him for money for the Armenian relief
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
that he contributed to.
Yeah, well, that's actually just one letter,
Yeah.
but,
What I came up at the Brimfield Market is certificates given to him for the donations and the amounts.
Yeah.
Which I should bring up to the library and put up there, to all the different religious groups, all the different groups that he donated.
Oh.
He got a large certificate, and these are all the originals that he got.
How'd they end up in Brimfield?
It was at a flea market. It was a historic. The one gentleman always had all kind of historical items. So I'd every year I'd
Yeah, I
go
don't
to
know how he ended up with them.
yeah. And this was in Boston. The one I don't know. I saw when I saw Whitinsville and Arthur
Yeah.
Fletcher Whitin.
I'm curious how those papers end up that way.
Yeah.
yeah.
So the next slide is, a picture's worth 1,000 words, I guess, and those are some of the next slide will show some of the sites that Arthur Fletcher contributed to today. And you'll recognize a lot of them.
There we go.
There we go. The Spinning Ring Company, the library, the town hall, Cotton Mill Apartments, LaSalle Field, there's still a sign out in front, the old high school, and the War Memorial.
Yeah.
Which, according to the articles, would never have been completed if it hadn't been for Arthur securing the stone for the base of the memorial, because it was right after World War I, and there was a shortage, and because of his efforts, it was actually completed and was able to be
That's a Civil War
celebrated.
memorial.
Yes,
So, yeah,
Now, every town has one, but for the most part, it might be a soldier on the pedestal.
yeah.
This is really
Beautiful.
unique. This is, I mean, and it gets a lot of attention from a lot of people, will tell you that,
Yeah.
they're amazed when they see that. It's so
Yeah.
large, and with the eagle, it really is something, it's different, totally different.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a whole
well-
book that came out last year. And I think the sculptor was McNeil,
Yeah.
out of New York, I believe.
Yeah, okay, but we had Civil War, all my students that taught Civil War history in the 8th grade, we'd have our annual Civil War dedication
Yeah.
right here. We brought
Yeah.
the students
Yeah.
out, read through the rolls of, and I'm sure many of the students out there will remember that Civil War dedication every year that
Well,
I
you used to have the
taught.
battlegrounds out on the field too,
Right.
and your dead bodies and stuff. And I remember my husband used to bring all his guns in, and it was just,
I don't
those
think that would
days are
happen
gone.
today, yeah, I think not. The next one shows exactly all of the Whiten properties. The yellow circled property is actually the one that we're
Yeah.
talking about now, the Arthur Fletcher Whitin home. And the blue circle is Memorial Square, so you'll see that Linwood Ave, and then down in the corner it says Railroad Ave, which is what it used to be.
Right.
And where some of the other buildings are cited that we referred to, but that was in days gone by,
Yeah.
a
Yes.
snapshot of that area. And then we do have an older picture of the house that was taken circa 1899. If you don't recognize the house, you could recognize the wall, because I don't think
Yeah.
the wall has moved or changed since it was, probably built by the Whitens back.
Yeah, it shows how well constructed it was.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you'll notice too that it's not painted white. It's got a Victorian paint
Right.
color scheme.
This is the only, well, there's two properties that are left in town that were built by the Whiten that has Victorian Gothic style. And it's identified specifically by the architectural features written there. And if you held that in front of you as you looked at the house, you could actually identify the hip roof and the gabled roofs and the overbays and the pavilions. But this other home, this home is owned by the town. The
Right.
other home is Carr Funeral Home, that is still standing.
Oh,
The third home, and if you had pictures of them side by side, you could see the architectural features that are very similar.
Right.
The other property and it was built in the same year, actually, by the Whitens in 1875, the Carr home and this one as well.
Yeah.
The other
well,
example.
the car home was Gustav Taft's house.
Right.
Yeah.
He
Because
was the
later that's
superintendent of the shop.
Superintendent of the
Superintendent of the
mills.
Whitens, yeah.
In 1880, he built that, and this was 1875. In 1880, he was receiving a salary of $20,000.
That's a lot of money
That
back
was a
then.
lot of money but he ran the mills, he was the
Right.
superintendent of all the entire White Machine Works, so
Yes.
that was only some of the Whitens that got paid higher than he did. Yeah.
There was another example of this architecture, and that was the Clark Street School on Cross Street.
Yeah.
And that was demolished in
Right.
1991.
Yeah.
Long gone.
Long gone.
Yeah.
But it had the same architecture. The
Yeah.
pictures will tell us that. So
Well, all
today,
the schools they built actually look the same.
Just about, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
about, they all,
Well,
yeah.
they were all built because they had brought in so many new
Right,
workers,
and
and
they
had
needed to
to.
educate them to work in the shop.
Yeah.
And they built them in the villages, because you didn't have the transportation.
Yeah.
So they built them close to them. That's why you had the West End School served the village. You had a Rockdale School here.
Well, you had 8 school districts in the town.
Districts, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had a school building, they made it so you didn't walk past 2 miles. That's
Yeah.
what the Whiten kind of regulations
Yeah,
were.
Because you went to the plumber school,
Right.
right? I went to the West End school.
Yeah, I went to the Rockdale.
Rockdale
Rockdale
School,
School,
yeah.
that's where I went.
Then we had, you had a school on Plymouth Corner. I mean,
Right.
Plymouth Corner, Adams Corners.
Yeah, Adams
yeah.
Fork Corner,
Yeah.
the Adams Fork.
A little
And
one,
on
yeah.
Prentice, there's a
Right.
brick house there on the corner of Prentice.
That actually was a
and Carr.
regional school with
That was,
Sutton.
that was a
Yeah.
school, yeah.
No,
The
so-
amazing thing is, they
So-
invested in education,
Yeah.
because they cared about having an educated
Yeah.
community, which at that time is tremendous, which to Kenny's point is the
Yeah.
paternalistic society.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they needed an educated workforce to work
Yeah.
within the shop.
Well, even with the immigrants too, they had an evening school for, English
Yes.
and civics and that type of thing. Get them ready to get their citizenship.
Night school.
Actually, the first school was, the meeting house was actually where John Creighton Whiten also taught some of the students there, the little bit older students there, and that was right there in the meeting house at the top of the hill with a green
Oh, okay.
water
Yeah.
tower. That was the first school that was in,
And then,
Well,
the-
that's where Paul,
yeah.
first Paul got his education from
and
them.
then they built the school across the street on the Baswell property.
Right, right.
My father went to school there.
Oh, okay.
I didn't go to school in any of them, but I drove by all of them.
Then, yeah, the Linwood School was right where Pirates Cove is now.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right, that was the Linwood School.
Yeah.
And they were all the same architecture.
Right,
Just about,
right,
they were all
yeah.
built in, probably within 30 years of each
Yeah.
other, yeah.
The high school's a little different, LaSalle,
Well, yeah.
with brick and the,
Yeah.
what was, and
Well, the
that was in
original
the
high school
30s,
was the
right?
Aldrich School.
Right.
Right.
That was the
Well,
first high
Well,
school.
see,
Yeah.
this is where there's always discrepancy here. In the Church Street School, they had elementary, but upstairs, they had the first three graduates that graduated from the Church Street School as high school graduates in 1867.
Okay.
Then they went to the Grove Street School.
Grove Street.
And
And
then
then-
they built in 1890, the present Grammar School, which
Yeah.
was known as Northbridge, the first Northbridge High School,
Yeah.
separate.
Yeah,
But the new sign at Aldrich will
Right.
say that it's the first
first-
Northbridge
First separate high school,
Yeah,
yeah.
separate high school.
Yeah, and like you say, all built by the Whitens.
Right, right, donated funds from the Whitens, yeah.
Yeah,
So the next slide, that's what it looked like then, and this is what it looks like now. And there's that wall again, standing
Yeah.
perfectly strong and straight. And this is taken from Linwood Ave. You can see the elementary school in the background. The year that the town actually acquired the property was 1971. But what's a little confusing is that the home, all the way back to what now people are calling Lot B, was one big
it
lot.
was one big one.
Yeah.
They sold off a portion of the, sort of, I'll call it the back property, across from St. Pat's. And they apportioned that so that this property now is part of what's known as the Cross Street School property,
Right.
which includes the original parochial school that was built. And all of that was sold in 1971 to the town for
And before that, when-
$425,000.
Yeah,
All of that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when on the back property too is where the Adams studio
Sure,
was
yeah.
too.
yes.
Yeah,
And it actually has housed central administration since 1974.
Yeah.
About
Yeah.
the school administration. And they have been amazing stewards of the building, which we'll see. We're gonna take a little tour inside the house.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
everybody can see why it's worth saving.
yeah.
Let me go to the next slide. This is predominantly displayed, right, Ken, when we went on the tour?
Right,
I don't know if you wanna.
that's the, for the National Register district.
District.
Yeah, in 1983, it took me 4 years, 326 properties, researched all of them over the summer months, and in 1983, the State Historical Commission granted us and made us for the largest National Register district in Massachusetts,
Yeah.
with those properties at that time.
Wow.
And that's why it's important, we've been chosen by the National Park Service to be one of two segments of Massachusetts to be the Blackstone
Yes.
Valley National Park, because we have this well-preserved mill village that shows not only the various worker housing projects, the 1826 worker housing, the 1835 worker housing, the 1840 worker housing, and right up until 1921-22, Summit Street, Leland Road, that was the last housing project of the Whitens, but they're all there and show
Yes.
the growth of worker housing and the mansions to show the growth as the Whitens got wealthier, the more magnificent were the mansions, as opposed to the simple homes of the early years, like Mr. James Fletcher's
Yeah.
house, or Paul Whitin. He was in a small cottage right where
Town hall.
where the plaza is there now. He was up right on the street, a small little cottage that was there that was torn down. But they were simple homes. But as their
Yes.
wealth grew with the industry, they, in 1831, John C. built his, son John C. built his, and Paul Whitin in 1800 built his right where the town hall is, and now they moved it down to Linwood Ave. They wanted to preserve it for posterity as well. They moved it, and the interesting thing, Arthur Fletcher, the grandson of Paul Whitin, his mansion's built right across the street where Paul Whitin's original homestead, which sat right where the town hall was, and
Yes.
it's now preserved. So grandson and grandfather right across
Right,
the
across
street
from
from
one
each other.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
one of the things that is worth noting is that not every property can be part of the National Historic Register. Their gatekeepers are that it must be architecturally, archaeologically, historically, and culturally significant. So they've given that distinction to this property as noted by this plaque, which is displayed inside the building. And as Ken mentioned, it's across the street from Colonel Paul Whiting's homestead, which you can see from the front porch. But it's also across the street from the Mumford River Walk,
Yeah.
which is something we're excited about having in the community. And it's a stop on all the tours,
Yeah.
Right.
And so this past year, we've probably toured between the society and the commission, thanks to Ken and Carol, over 300 people on a couple tours. So
Oh, yeah, I get to.
At least.
It's very popular.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Blackstone National Park Service conducts tours too, and this is a
Yes.
stop for them.
And the trolley tours have been going since 1977. Every year, one or sometimes two a year, trolley tours. So I'd say a few thousand people over those years have
Sure.
been
Yeah.
on tours of the historic
It
village.
fills up every year.
Yeah, fills up
Oh, yeah.
every year.
So we get to showcase our history and show them a little about what
Right.
Northbridge and Whitensville's all about.
Well,
Next slide actually brings us inside. So a lot of folks have been by this. Perhaps if you've had children in the schools and a reason to go to central office, you've been in that building. I was there many, many times when I was principal, but never really stopped to appreciate what it really looked like. So we wanted to just show folks how much of the property is really still well maintained. That's a view going up the driveway, the side view. That's the side of the property. So if you remember the last slide and the description of what makes it a Victorian Gothic, it's the gables and it's that bump out, the bays, the overhanging roof, the hip roof design, so you can see that. And then it is accessible. There's a ramp to get up to the top. That's the porch, and then from the inside, that's a view across the street. Ken, that White House was, you had mentioned that was something historically significant too.
The Methodist Hall,
The Methodist Hall.
that was the original Methodist church, and with a hall, for services upstairs, and that's their three key buildings right there in that very little spot, the tripod, I call it, of history there with the Methodist Hall, Paul Whitin's original homestead, and Arthur Fletcher's homestead.
But I think you had mentioned when we were putting this together that they actually had donated to almost all the churches in the community.
yeah,
Absolutely.
they donated the land.
Including
yeah.
land and so forth to just about every church that
Yeah.
is
Right.
in town. And
Yeah.
we used to have 13 churches in town. I don't know if we still
Yeah.
do.
I think we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, down here, that stone house over the next to mine, that was the first Catholic church. And the Whitens built it because we're bringing all these French Canadians in to work the cotton mill.
Yeah.
And then when it got big enough, they built the church up on the hill, St. Peter's.
Yeah, St.
And-
Peter's Church, interesting, because my grandmother and grandfather were the second couple to get married in that church. It was finished in 1913,
Yeah.
and they were married in, February of 1914. So they were the second couple to get married there in that brand-new church.
Yeah.
What's interesting, Rockdale was a combination of French Canadians and Polish.
Yes,
Pretty much those are two large immigrant groups of Rockdale, and of course, the French Canadians had the early mass. The 8 o'clock mass was the Polish mass, and then 9:30 mass was the French Canadians again.
yeah, and it was in their language.
Their language, yeah. The priest was in their language. The Polish mass was said by a Polish priest that came in
Yeah.
for services.
As I say, the Christian Reformed Church too on Pleasant Street.
Yes,
That was in, I
which
don't know if it was in
was
Dutch
the
or
Whitens that
Frisian.
had the mill,
Yeah,
they had the Congregational Church there.
yeah.
We-
But that
we-
was up until World War II.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. We had more churches per capita than any town, supposedly Massachusetts is what I got from the Historical Commission. The number of churches at one point, I think, was 11 churches for a small
Yeah.
community,
Yeah,
Yeah,
including the French church on the other side of the river.
And many of the buildings are still standing.
Hmm?
The one in Northbridge Center is that's the oldest church in the town.
That was the oldest church, because the church,
well,
because
that
they,
building itself was built by Pete Koopman in 1930s.
right, because
no,
they had,
no, no,
I
I'm
think
not
they had-
talking, the first church was actually the meeting house with.
Right, it was a meeting house on
And-
top where the water tower
And
is.
then when the state, the Articles of Confederation, and what happened is church and state, they were starting to separate.
Right.
And as a result, that remained as political, and the church built across the street up in Northbridge Center.
But didn't they
was-
have a fire too?
It was set fire in that was built 1782 and 1835, a fire that burnt down a good portion, but they rebuilt it to the original. And then in 1935, 100 years later, this is how coincidental is that, it burnt again,
Yeah.
not totally, but they restored it to the
It was
original,
Pete Koopman that did it.
yeah, on that 1931, yes.
Yeah, my father told me that story.
Yeah, yeah. But it's 100 years apart, same year.
Yeah, imagine that.
1835, 1930.
Just like the town hall and the community center.
Yeah.
Must be 100-year plan or
As I say,
strategy.
next year too is the 100th anniversary of the Whitensville Golf Club.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, one of the greatest, one of the best golf courses in the country.
Yeah.
Well laid out, it's only a 9-hole, but
And Arthur Fletcher was involved with that, because when he sold off the cotton mill also had the cotton mill farm, which was the land for the,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't
but-
sell it, he wouldn't sell the land originally, because he figured if they had a golf course, then all the executives would be playing golf rather than being in church.
Which they probably did long-term anyway.
Yeah,
So the next slide is, I'm gonna start taking us inside the property, and you can see that it's dated and Arthur's name is on the outside. But just notice the beauty of the doors. I mean, there have been some upgrades over the years, and so those are new doors, but they don't distract or
Yeah.
detract from
Yeah.
the character of the building.
Yeah.
Those are the original doors. So we're gonna walk inside and take a look at some of the original woodwork
Yeah.
that is still in place.
amazing.
The craftsmanship, the condition, and that's all throughout the house. Those are the stairs that lead to the second floor that, they don't lead to the third floor anymore, but they do
No,
definitely lead to the
right.
second floor. The stained glass is still intact, which is visible from outside and certainly shines beautifully when the sun comes through inside. Those are original pocket doors up in the corner of the property that over the transoms of a lot of the doors, the original detailed, I don't know if you can tell in that uppermost corner picture, but the craftsmanship on the detail over the door jambs is still there and very, very well preserved. And the columns that are found throughout the building are
Now,
also to
Christine,
the right.
the bottom left corner, is that like in the dining room?
That is not, I don't know if there's a dining room per se anymore, but it is located in one of the meeting areas that is used by central administration.
Okay.
But it's completely, still
It looks
intact.
like that might have been the dining hall
Yeah.
for
Right,
my
right.
guess, right there.
And right
You'd have your
behind
buffet
it
over there.
Yeah.
is another doorway
Yeah.
that you can see. So those are just some snapshots of what really strikes you when you walk through and how over the years, 1875, the interior is still as beautiful as it is. And then we travel through a little bit and we look at all the fireplaces that are still intact. So each one of these rooms obviously has been repurposed for meeting space. But things like the porcelain doorknobs on the door in the upper corner is still intact. The ornate detail around each of the fireplaces, the ceramic work, and I'm not sure if it's ceramic or what it was for the time, but in the picture on the left. And we found this little light fixture on the third floor, very much Victorian looking,
Yeah.
that shows that light bulbs were in place at some point through the house, whether it was a retro fit or if it was there when, Arthur was there. But it's still, the flowers are still intact, the painting on that fixture is still quite beautiful.
As I say, the fixture probably was gas originally, because it was in 1890 that the main streets got the electricity.
The picture above, and Carol, I think you commented about this, the sinks that are in place may have been upgraded for some bathroom renovations over the years. But if you can see the picture that's up in the top right, the fireplace is there, but next to it is a beautiful marble-topped, original marble
Yeah.
basin.
Oh, okay.
It could have, it's a sink now, I'm not sure if it was originally there, but
Oh, it was marble, it probably
it's
was.
beautiful, yeah, it's still intact. So the next slide takes us through what are some of the upgrades that were done over the years. You notice the bathroom has been upgraded somewhat, but that marble top, I think, is still there. So they repurposed the vanity base, but the marble is still original. The doors that lead into all of the rooms, you can see the door, it's open, are original. They're that wood, beautiful wood.
Yeah.
The picture in the middle just shows you, yes, we had to tell people where the exits were and light them up according to new building code. But those are the original doors that you saw the outside of. And then on the other side, we're not sure the date of that, but it's still old wooden cabinetry with sort of a modern pantry feel. I think that's sort of like a little
Looks like
kitchenette area.
yellow Formica.
But that's yellow Formica, right? That is not original marble, but it's still, original to the building. Then we go up to the back stairwell. The one on the left is actually the front stairs going up to the second floor. But the one in the middle still is wainscoted.
Yeah.
It's still
Probably
in
for the service quarters.
service quarters, right?
Yeah.
It's in great shape. And it took us up to the third floor, which was used for storage. But I think it's important to note that sometimes people have perceptions of, oh, the third floor must be, full of mice and attic ridden and the plaster's falling down. And
Yeah.
there's obviously some signs of wear. You can notice in the right corner, the chimney, that's the chimney, and it looks like there's some, wetness
Some
or
rain damage, yeah.
But overall, the third floor still has the original transoms. There's a little picture in the middle with, that was our tour guide from school administration.
Yeah.
And, that glass is still intact. The stairwells are completely intact.
Yeah.
And even the view out the window, it's still in good condition. I think he was surprised when
Yeah,
we went
yeah,
up there.
yeah. It's, like I say, well preserved, and this is one of the reasons we wanted a preservation restriction, because this is the last mansion here in downtown, with the two fires we've had down in Linwood and with the Chester LaSalle home. This still portrays the elegance of the Whitins and how they lived, within amongst the population of workers. So it's important that this article pass, because for preservation's sake, this didn't have a preservation restriction, anything could be done to it. Now with a preservation restriction, you can still make changes, but it just goes through certain procedures to make sure that the historic character
Let's
remains.
get to what
So
we're really here for.
right.
And that is town meeting, which
Yes.
is Tuesday coming up, right?
October
a week.
22nd?
A week from
Second,
Tuesday.
22nd, a week,
yeah.
yeah.
7
In 2
p.m.
weeks, on a Tuesday.
Right.
And what article is this, number?
So it's warrant article number 6.
Number 6.
We
okay.
have gone before the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen and shared the reasons why we would like this house to be
Yeah.
preserved.
I know selectmen support it.
The unanimous approval and unanimous approval from FinCom.
Okay.
So now we
Like-
just
like-
need the voters to
Yeah.
also give their approval.
And like I say, the inner workings of the community have all changed, but the architectural skeleton is there to remind us of the glory and what was once there
Yes.
and what we were at the height of the largest textile machine shop in the world, 5,200 workers in the machine shop and 3 shifts, and the other mills with some 480 employees. So you can, for a small town, the amount of workers within this community. So that architectural skeleton is here, but the inner workings have all changed. So we want to save our history so people can look back and say, this is what once was. And this is the perfect example of a Whiten mansion.
I think it's important to note that this property, you cannot take a preservation restriction just on any property that you think is worth
Right.
being,
You have to justify
restored.
it.
The owners of the property are the ones who actually have to agree to take out a restriction on the property. So
Right.
we've been asked, from a historical commission standpoint, why aren't this building or that building? This is town-owned, it's not privately owned.
Right.
In the cases of preservation restrictions, the owners must also be a partner and collaborate in the process of getting a restriction.
Okay, we got caller. Go ahead, caller, you're on.
Hey, a comment and a question. Comment, when you guys leave the studio tonight, look up in the sky. The Aurora Borealis are putting on quite a show tonight for Whitensville.
Oh.
And my question is,
Thank you.
for somebody new to town, what would be a good way to learn about the history of Whitensville and the Whiten family?
You talk to Ken, he knows more about than anyone else in town. He
Carol,
knows more of the Whiten history than the Whitens.
Okay.
Yeah.
I played Paul Whiten for the last, since 1977, so, and I got my master's degree on the social and economic development of Whitensville, so I'm pretty well versed.
Hung up.
I would also add that there is a historical society that is actively seeking members, and they are housed in the Fletcher House, that's their property, and the town graciously voted to help us restore that building at town meeting last year, and we're doing that. So Carol's the treasurer of the Northbridge Historical Society. If you're interested in the history, join the Historical Society.
That's what I say, that's not the only hat I wear. The other thing is,
The
the
library.
gentleman who was asking about the history, there's a lot of historical documentation on the library's
Yeah,
website.
oh, yeah.
And if you go on there, like Jane Dudley's books on there, Cora Berry Whiten's Ancestors and Kindred's on there,
Now, the
all of
library-
Peter Hackett's.
You have a room in the library
Right.
dedicated to
Yep.
the Whitens,
I'm there on
right?
Wednesday afternoons, other than this week, and everything is there.
And you might mention bachelor's handwritten history that the Whitens, contracted him to do, which
Yep.
goes back to the time of the Indians and the
Yes.
deeds that were transferred between Indians
It's
and
the
the
only
white
copy in
settlers.
the world.
Right.
Yeah.
We have enough history and artifacts and documents to start a museum.
Yeah.
And that's maybe someday where we'll get to.
Well, in some ways, the whole town's a museum.
The whole town
I
is a
mean,
museum, and
Northbridge
preserving this is
residents
a
live
piece
in a
of it.
national park.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
Right, which is something that you could do with this building in the future.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's,
That's why
It'd be a great museum.
it'd be perfect if, like I said, the town owns it, the school administration, that's fine, that's great. The town owns it, but if it were ever the school administration, we're gonna move, that I firmly believe we should keep that for posterity as part of our history and put a
absolutely.
museum in there
Yeah.
or whatever. I'm totally convinced that that would be the right thing to do.
so, Harry, I'm glad you asked about the restriction because there are a few misconceptions about preservation restrictions.
Right,
And I'll just sort of share the discussions we've had with both FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. A restriction does not mean that you cannot upgrade the building. The
Right.
mechanics of a building, whether it's whether it's air conditioning or fire or electrical or heating, those kinds of mechanical upgrades are absolutely possible with a restriction. The concern of the Mass Historical Commission, who grants the restrictions, would be that whatever is done with the building preserves all those things that it identified why it's on the register, architecturally significant, historically significant. And so any changes to the exterior of the building and certain changes to the interior would have to be reviewed with the Northbridge Historical Commission, which Ken and I are both
Right.
on, and also Mass Historical. But there are upgrades that can be done. Some of the historical homes have even put solar panels on, and it's been approved. So it does not mean that it can't be touched. The other thing
Right.
that's true is it can still be sold. It just needs, when it's sold, that restriction remains
Goes
part
with
of the
it.
deed.
right.
So it transfers with the deed. So I wanted to address that because that is a myth that people have, that once a restriction is placed on the building, you can't touch it. And that's not really the case.
No, and that was not the case with the historic district.
Right.
Well, you want to honor the legacy.
Right,
And the town hall
Yeah.
has had and Cotton Mill.
Cotton
Yeah.
Mill.
yeah, we've done changes to both.
Trinity Episcopal Church,
Yeah.
the Whitin Community Center. We've got
Yeah.
many, we were fortunate in town that all of the matching
Major
grants.
changes at a community center,
Sure,
and with no problem.
right.
And with the establishment of the Whitinsville Historic Downtown Crossroads District, I always have to remember the order of those words. I know they're all in there somewhere, I just
Yeah.
don't always get them right. That gives an extra protection to the 13 properties that have been identified as historically significant as well. But to Carol's point, all of Whitinsville is living history when you think about the buildings. And
I mean, my own opinion, that would make a great museum and the town maintain it. And tourism is because, we don't realize there's a lot of tourism going on here. We are one of two communities that are part of the Blackstone River National Park, which is separate from the corridor.
Right.
And if
So-
anyone's really interested in history, there's always spots on the Historical Commission to join and,
And the
actively get
Historical
involved, and
Society.
the Historical Society.
Oh, yes.
And you'll notice the age cohort sitting here.
But, well,
I think we're all pretty much in the zone at this point.
Well, yeah,
we got another call here.
yeah, we need some new blood.
Right.
Go ahead, caller.
Good evening. I would like to say that I'd like to thank you all, and all your efforts have not gone unnoticed for a town you also ably serve. And legions of people that I've spoke to and received emails, and they said that they'll be all supporting this at town meeting. And it's my understanding that if this you can be able to get some more grants from the Mass Historic Commission. Would that be possible?
So, that's a great question, and I think I recognize the voice, but I'm not quite sure. We did share that if a restriction is placed on this building, it provides us two opportunities to access grant funds that we otherwise would not have.
Right,
One is the Mass Historical Commission, which right now is granting up to $100,000 in a match form. So the town would come up with 100 and we would come, for certain upgrades and things like that. But also, the Community Preservation
the history.
Commission has a silo, I call
Yeah.
them one of the four
right.
silos.
One of the budgets is history.
And you're on CPC as well?
Yes.
That is historic resources, which is
Yes.
what we use to
Yeah, 'cause, I mean,
fund.
it'd be nice if we could get some grants to fix that area that's up in the attic,
Yeah.
Anything's possible.
Right.
Yes. But I'll be supporting this at town meeting, and I know a lot of other people will. And again, thank you all for your excellent efforts, and thank you, Harry and NCTV, for putting
on this wonderful show tonight and informing the public of this historic treasure in our town. And I'll see you guys at town meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barry. What people have to understand too, this is completely separate from the issue about what we're gonna do with the former school.
Correct.
They're totally separate.
The property is now a piece of the property. Let me rephrase it. The entire section is called Lot B, but people are referring to it as Cross Street property.
Right.
This home is situated on that lot. The
Right,
discussions that are coming up, that precede us on the town floor, warrant articles 4 and 5, have to do with the elementary school and that property.
right, the footprint of the school only.
Right. They do not, this is not addressing this home.
Right,
We felt, the Historic Commission felt, that all too often we hear, why didn't someone do something about it?
Yeah.
You know, if there's an incident with a property that's historically significant or significant to the town in some way. This is our opportunity to be proactive. We're not sure what's gonna happen with the NES property or the rest of Cross Street lot, but we can be sure about what happens to this. And that
Right.
would be taking the step to put a preservation restriction on it. It's noteworthy to say and to share that the interest in this property specifically with folks who may have responded to the RFP for the cross-lot property had no interest in this home.
no,
So it didn't stop anyone from, or encourage anyone, I should say, either way, to come forward and respond to that. So the suggestion that it may have had something to do with whether people were interested in cross lots or not, it was sort of an irrelevant discussion. There was no addressing the home in that process. But it is included in the lot and was included in the proposal going forward. So we felt as a commission that this is our opportunity to be proactive and save this house for all of the reasons you've seen and we've talked about.
right, and once we do, if we were to sell that property, this could be lobbed off.
Right.
You
Absolutely,
could make a separate lot here.
absolutely,
Very easily, it would meet zoning with no problem.
right.
It just happens when it was built by the Whitins, it was all one piece of property.
Mhm.
And when the church bought it, they bought the whole thing.
Right.
So it just stayed that way for now, but that can be changed very easily. And I said, this really needs to be preserved because we haven't got many of the Whitins homes left.
Not standing completely,
Intact.
we tried to think of another word today that wasn't intact. We did a thesaurus and we came up with 36 words and none of them really say intact, and that's the case.
Yeah,
We actually have a couple more slides to give examples of what was once and is now no longer standing, and another reason why we want to preserve this. So this is standing on the front porch. That gray house in the middle is his grandfather's house.
Yeah.
That's Colonel Paul Whitin's house.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
That was moved on the back of a wagon with oxen pulling it down. The foundation was already built prior, measured out, and they set that down. They filled the cellar with dirt,
Yep.
and they jacked down the house, and then the cellar had to be shoveled out through the cellar windows, the dirt that was in there. That's
labor was cheap.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's amazing how many buildings they moved.
lots of them.
It was quite common to do that.
John C. White, the retirement home up on High Street, that was moved from where the gym is today
Yes,
up
to Chestnut Street.
up to there on High Street,
Yeah.
And
with the columns and all.
Yeah.
That was John C.
Yeah.
Whiten's first mansion built in 1831.
amazing really what they
Yeah.
did. Now, was that house converted into a duplex that we just saw?
Yeah, I
Which,
think so.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's
Yeah.
turned in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
it wasn't
Yeah.
originally a duplex.
But the doorway, the double doorway, but other than that, the windows are all intact. The, usually
Right.
they're 5 over
Yeah.
and 4 on each side of the doors, the way that federal
Well,
style.
even then, I mean, when the house was at, town hall is.
Right.
A memorial hall. There was an L off
L
of
wing.
it too. And the
Oh.
same with the Fletcher house.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were
There
two
was
L's.
2 L's off of that house.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes rented out to people when those L's, but in Paul Whiten's case, that they had a wing that shot into where the parking lot is there now and shot off toward the back, and
Yeah.
that couldn't be moved
Yeah.
as one, so they severed it there, destroyed that part, but the main mansion, the 9-room homestead was
Yep,
preserved.
So there was a little shot, there's a beautiful shot up Linwood Ave towards Memorial Square.
Yeah.
And then you can see the fence that was put up to separate, really, to your point, Harry, to separate it from the NES property, as if it were a separate lot. And then just a very up-close shot of one of the columns that's original to the building that's still standing, and some of the ornate cornice work
Yeah.
that is on the top of the
all
Fletcher
done by
house.
hand.
Yeah.
Didn't have any power tools.
1875, no.
No, it was all done by, it's amazing the talent that they had.
And then the last slide, this is just literally a snapshot of snapshots that are at the town hall. If you haven't been to Memorial Town Hall and up on it's actually the second floor,
Second floor.
Yeah.
where the town clerk is, take a look at the pictures of what was
Houses
once.
that are gone.
Yes, the grandeur
Yeah,
of
the houses that
Whitensville,
are
and
gone.
most of them have been lost over the years. The 2 in the corner are the most recent ones. The left, we might recognize as the Victorian, we call it the Victorian.
Yeah.
You know, that owner suffered a loss, but, you know, I guess credit goes to him for covering that building
Yes,
and
and they're
trying
working
to
to get it
keep it
back.
safe.
Yeah.
Yes, and working to get it back. He's working very hard, and there is an article also, I think, at town meeting to help
The
them out a
type of
little.
architecture it was, it's very expensive and very hard to do.
Yeah.
Right,
And part of it's copper,
yeah.
which it talks a lot of money, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand to a big, you know, a significant expense, he had that building covered when the fire took place so that there wouldn't be
Yes.
further destruction of
Yes.
the property.
Quite expensive.
that's why I
too.
support what he wants to put some condos in the back. I don't find a problem with that. We already have condos in the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that also was part of the land before they built the
Right.
condos.
Right.
So it's no big deal. And it'll help him to be able to finance
Yeah,
it.
but finance,
And then, of course, the bottom is Oakhurst, otherwise known as the
Yeah.
LaSalle Mansion,
Yeah.
which unfortunately does not look like that today.
No,
No.
it looks a lot worse. It works worse now than when they had the fire.
You know. So it just, you know, what can you do as a member of the community? We're encouraging you to attend town meeting. It ought to be an
Yes.
interesting meeting. And Article 6 is.
It won't be long, there's only seven articles, I believe.
You know, we're
Some
not
articles,
demolishing, we're not
No.
asking for money, we're just asking to
Yeah, it's not gonna
preserve what we
cost a
have.
nickel, it's not gonna cost the taxpayers a nickel.
I'd like to see all my students out there that went on all my trolley tours, learn about local history, come out to the town meeting, support this article, Article 6, on preservation of the Arthur Fletcher Whitin mansion.
And for more
We gotta
information, you can email the Northbridge Historical Commission for a FAQ, and we'll send it out to you at
All right.
gmail.com.
Okay, thanks for tuning in, the computer's gonna shut us off in about 30 seconds, less than that.